Okay, thank you. So this broadcast is the property of Codependents Anonymous. Reproduction without written permission from Codependents Anonymous is not permitted. We're going to start with a moment of silence, followed by the CoDA opening prayer. In the spirit of love and truth, we ask our higher power to guide us as we share our experience, strength, and hope. We open our hearts to wisdom, the warmth of love, and the joy of acceptance. So today, I'd like to introduce Jen L. From Nevada, who is going to speak on when people break rules and how do I deal with it. She is going to speak until about 12:40, and after that, we're going to open up for questions and comments. So if everybody could mute while she is speaking, and welcome, Jen.
Thank you. My name is Jen L., and I am codependent. Hi, everybody. I've been in CoDA for over 10 years, some maybe 13 years now, and I've done service at the meeting level, the intergroup level, and the world service level. And I have felt a definite pull on my heart as to how to handle when someone is breaking what I consider to be the rules of CoDA. And it began when I was in our local meeting and someone was cross-talking. I wasn't the one speaking at the time, but it was upsetting to the person that was speaking that was cross-talked. And at the time, our meeting was very new and very inexperienced, and no one really knew how to handle it. And it was interesting because what I first do is I always go to our CoDA literature first. I go to our fellowship service manual and our meeting materials to kind of read through our literature and see what the guide is on how to handle when things aren't going my way at a meeting. And I learned about the business meeting process. And in that meeting, I ask at the appropriate time as an announcement if everyone in the meeting would be open to having a business meeting to discuss a couple of topics. And it was very tense at first because I was nervous to call someone out. And what transpired was far more beneficial to me as a person than whatever little minor thing was going on in our meeting. So what happened is we had a business meeting after our current home group meeting, and we discussed how we were going to handle crosstalk. But during that conversation, it opened it up to add other topics. Well, what do we do when someone brings a baby to the meeting? What do we do when the leader doesn't show up? What do we do? A lot of questions. And we were able to go around and discuss these topics without interrupting each other and actually hearing each other out. And at the end of that, we came to a group conscience, which is the decision that is made by a majority vote or the spiritual awakening in the room that comes together that decides what is best for those there. And we decided that we would read a phrase about crosstalk, and then halfway through our meeting, we would read it again just to make sure that everybody was on the same page. But another part that was really helpful was during our opening script, the part that we read before we start our meeting, we gave examples of what crosstalk sounded like so that people understood not only what it looked like, but what the healthy method was. An example would be, instead of saying, I heard Jen say this and I can really relate and that happened to me too, I gave the example that when I hear something that I can relate to, I just say, I heard a lot of good ideas today and what comes up for me. And so I kept those statements as I statements. At the intergroup level, I went to our local intergroup at the time, and I was a group service representative. And I participated as a voting meeting rep on issues that were in the intergroup. And again, there were decisions that were made that not everyone always agreed with. And people would bring something to the intergroup and they say, hey, so-and-so's not doing it right, and they're breaking the rules. And so it was an interesting process to break that down, because what does that mean? The majority of the material that we have in CoDA are guidelines. And ultimately, our higher power is who we go to with our questions and concerns. But in an intergroup, obviously, we need to address an issue when someone presents it. So somebody comes to intergroup and they say, hey, so-and-so is leading the meeting and they're using outside literature. And someone else speaks up and says, well, that's wrong. We only use CoDA endorsed literature. And so then I ask the question, is it really a hard rule, or is it someone's preference? And are we trying to manipulate each other to do things our way, or is someone actually breaking the rules? And that was an interesting conversation, because what comes out of it is that, yet again, we go back from tradition one, unity for CoDA. Some people believe that only using CoDA endorsed literature promotes unity, although those that don't agree will say that tradition 4 is that every meeting is autonomous, and therefore they should be able to do what they want as long as the group conscience decides that that's what they want to read. And so what came out of that is that one person was trying to tell someone else what to do, and it wasn't even their meeting. And so we had to let that go, but it brought up a great conversation of how I deal with things that I don't agree with. So I go to my literature in my workbook. I understand unity as tradition 1. I understand the autonomy of tradition 4. And I also understand tradition 10, which tells me that CoDA does not endorse any outside issues. And what that means is, for me as a person, initially it just meant I don't talk about religion, I don't talk about politics, I don't talk about therapy or anything outside of our CoDA program in a CoDA meeting. But generally speaking, it also means that I mind my own business, and that when I see someone doing something that I consider wrong, that's between them and their higher power. So there's this little process that I go through now when I see something that I don't agree with. Do I not agree with it because I just have that preference? Do I not agree with it because I had some experience that tells me that there's another way? Or am I looking to manipulate somebody else in program? And so sometimes I found that when I saw someone doing something differently than what I would have done, I was trying to manipulate them. I would use CoDA language, I would use the traditions, I would use literature to convince others and to persuade them to do things my way. And that is also a form of 13 stepping, because I am trying to push what I want rather than being open to the group conscience and giving people room to work their own program. So again, dealing with people that break rules, I have to understand, is someone really breaking the rules. At the World Service level, there's a lot more structure and formal program in that as we discuss things at the CoDA Service conference on the floor, there is a formal process of how we bring emotion, how we discuss it, and how we decide. In that instance, there are some guidelines that could be considered rules on how much time and how we do this and how we do that. That's a completely different situation where someone that is experienced, such as a facilitator, speaks up and reminds everyone of what the rules are and how we do business. So for me, there's several different areas that I consider when I'm dealing with what I consider to be rule breakers. With all that aside, just general day-to-day rule breaking, how do I deal with the moment when I feel like something has transpired and it's just not right? I have to consult my sponsor, my higher power, and find out what it is that I'm trying to learn from this situation. Is this a situation where I need to speak up? I need to share what I observed. I need to inform someone how that affected me, and if there's something that we need to work out to keep our healthy relationship? Or is it an area that I really need to mind my own business because it's not my place and it's really not affecting or hurting others? It's just an opinion. So with that, I filter all of my work in CoDA through that and make sure that I try to keep my side of the street clean by minding my own business and yet still speaking up when I personally need to speak up. There was an instance where I felt like someone was dominating and bullying me. Not only did they call me out in front of everyone publicly that I had done something wrong and I basically had let everyone down in the room, but that I was violating traditions by what I had done. I felt incredibly uncomfortable. I felt hurt, and I wanted to just quit being in program altogether, because if no one is going to appreciate me, Martyr Jen is just going to walk away. And what I learned from that situation is that, number one, it doesn't matter what other people think of me. What other people think of me is none of my business. But number two, how am I going to speak up for myself? How am I going to keep my side of the street clean, state the facts without getting nasty and saying something mean to others? And that was really difficult. It actually took me 4 to 5 months of doing inventory and writing and talking with my sponsor to be able to finally address that person in that same format publicly, stating what had happened and how I felt about it in a way that wasn't shaming or disrespectful to them. And to this day, I get along with that person. We do business as codependents at the World Service level, but it's definitely taught me to have better boundaries. So I know that dealing with that is also difficult at times when I feel like someone's breaking the rules and my boundaries get violated. I'm triggered and I'm emotionally responsive, and I need to just slow down and check in and make sure that I'm following the process. For those of you listening, there is a document on CoDA.org that is produced by our Issues and Mediation Committee. It's called Dealing with Disagreement. It is also a structure or a process to follow when I feel like things are going wrong. And what that is that I address it person to person initially, and then I try to get someone to help. I go to the group. I go to the intergroup. And then if all else fails, that's when I go to IMC. And so for those of you that aren't aware of that process, it is out there. Part of what I wanted to bring up today about deal breaking is that I have a strong sense of right and wrong, and I struggle with letting things go. And I need to work on that. That's part of my inventory of minding my own business and focusing on my own recovery. Because oftentimes the time I'm spent looking at what other people are doing and judging what they're doing and calling everybody out and listing out their inventory is just distracting from the work that I need to do for myself. And I hope that was helpful. I had a couple other instances of deal breaking that I wanted to share. I thought we would be a little bit more interactive at this point, but I'm going to share one more instance of a deal breaker. So I was at a CoDA event, and someone was presenting, and someone came in and interrupted the proceedings. And they were yelling and screaming, and they basically demanded that we stop business and listen to them. And it was an interesting situation because I personally had never witnessed that before. I was instantly triggered, and yet I admired the ability of others to just, in a healthy and respectful way, to speak up and address that person and excuse them out of the room to address what the concern was, as opposed to making a spectacle and continuing the drama in the room. And so dealing with that problem and the rules of the room, obviously it's difficult to address in the moment when I'm triggered. And so I have to make sure that I check in with my higher power and give myself a little room before reacting to the situation. So I have a few questions that I wrote down for those of you that are on the phone with us, if you would want to share after I finish. 3 of the questions. Number 1, how do I tell someone how I feel about their behavior as opposed to keeping it about me and what I witnessed? And number 2, am I manipulating or trying to control the situation when I'm addressing someone that is a rule breaker in my mind? And 3, how does the common welfare of CoDA and the autonomy of Tradition 4 affect the dealing with people that I consider to be rule breakers? And with that, I pass to the group. Thanks.
Thank you, Jen. So does anybody, we're open for questions and feedback, etc.
I'd appreciate rewording or restating question 1.
Okay. Let me think of a different way how to put it.
I don't mean for you to reword it. I just couldn't write fast enough.
Oh, I'm sorry. Basically, I'm curious how we deal with it. How do other people deal with it in their meetings and in their experience in CoDA?
Well, what I got was, how do I tell someone how I feel about their behavior? And then there was something after that that I didn't get.
So how do I make statements and address it and keeping it in I statements? A lot of people use the format when you, I felt type of statements. And sometimes it's difficult to address because the situation may have nothing to do with me really, except that I witnessed it. How do I handle it when I see two people interacting, but I'm not involved, and yet I feel like they're breaking the rules or violating tradition? If I go to the person that I felt was violated or bullied, am I piling on to their shame and adding to their victim situation by saying, hey, this is what I witnessed, don't you feel that way? Or am I controlling and manipulating the bully by going over and saying, hey, this is what I witnessed, I think you need to stop because this is what I saw? Because there's that issue of, am I rescuing? Am I stepping in and rescuing people and getting in between them? Or am I doing a healthy observation as a codependent, stating what I observed? Thanks.
Okay, so with respect to question 3, I got, am I talking about the common welfare in terms of tradition 4? How could you restate, could you say your third question again, please?
So CoDA welfare is unity of tradition 1, but people also believe that tradition 4 says that every meeting is autonomous. And so oftentimes when someone does something that we don't agree with, they just flippantly say, well, every meeting is autonomous, so I can do what I want. But that's not exactly how it's intended. It gives people room to do things that the group decides, not one person violating another person's boundaries or rules as they may see it.
I'm Linda, codependent, and just as a preliminary essay, I find a question, your first question, kind of difficult because my first tendency is if I witnessed something that I thought was transgressive, it's hard for me not to go up and say that was way out of line. When it's and yet I do appreciate those people who can calmly say at the end of a meeting, we violated some traditions here by sharing about our jobs and our, how we earn our livings. And we try not to do that when we're sharing. So I know that there are people who do it, who have found a good way to let the group know gently. We need to bear our P's and Q's in mind. We need to have limits when we share. We can't just share freely. Oh, I've just made $1 million in the stock market or whatever. So, there are people who know how to do that calmly, and yet to see something happen, which, like I said, if it's abusive behavior, it's hard to know. Am I supposed to stand by and watch this? And with that, I pass.
If no one else has any answers to those questions, I do have one more, and that is when I witness someone breaking a rule, am I playing God? Am I deciding that I know better than anyone what has just transgressed or has happened, as opposed to finding out more? I've worked really hard to ask questions and get to know the situation a little bit better, rather than just deciding that I know what the person intended and trying to give people the benefit of the doubt. I know that can be difficult too, because I have no idea what was said or what was done before I was there, after I was there, witnessing two other people interacting. And I previously made the mistake of going to the person that I felt was being abused. And I said, why do you let that person talk to you that way? And then someone else brought it to my attention that I was just adding to it by piling on and shaming them for letting it happen. And I felt awful, and I went back and made amends to that person. And it reminded me yet again to mind my own business. And so it's a constant struggle for me between minding my own business and then speaking up and speaking my truth. And as a codependent, I quite often do not speak up. I don't share my opinions. I don't tell people when I feel hurt. I don't tell people anything about me that is personal or makes me vulnerable. And yet in this program, in my recovery, I am learning to be respectful of them and yet still say what I need to say. And so that's where I still struggle a little bit today. Am I rescuing someone? Am I stepping in where I don't belong? Or am I actually speaking up in a healthy way to let someone know what I witnessed? And with that, I pass. Thanks.
Thank you, Jen. Hi, I'm Catherine. I love this subject. It really, I think it's something that I know that I deal with all the time. And you touched on so many different thoughts. For me, I think what I've learned for myself is when I'm in a meeting or if I'm doing service at any level, that if I witness something, that the first thing that I have to really get clear with myself is what's being triggered inside of me. And I can't really take any type of action until I really figure out what's being triggered inside of me, because that's always my main issue that I have to look at. That's, for me, it's the main issue that I know is going to cloud my perception, and always clouded my perception before I started working this program. So what I always try to do is I try to work on that. I try to ask myself the question, what is my motivation? What's my motivation in saying or taking action? What is it inside of me that is being triggered in what I witnessed? And then what I always try to do is I go to my sponsor. I think that I've learned in this program that if I'm reacting, that I'm triggered. If I have a sense of urgency, then I'm triggered. And it's really better for me not to take action, to really sit with it, to get to a place where I figure out what's really going on with me, and then get to a place of how I can respond using the tools that I try to use. Before I started this program, I was always trying to manipulate, control, and change other people. And I think I was also playing God, because I believed that I knew better than everybody else. So in my working my program, I have to understand for myself that those are biggies for me. The example that was used about if I witnessed something, the way I work my program today is, for me, I don't get involved unless I'm first person, because I really don't know what's going on. And then I think that the program kind of sets up for me that if I feel really strongly, then I can bring it to a meeting, or I can bring it to a group, or I can bring it to a committee, and I can allow the group conscience process to discuss it and vote on something. And that helps me to really turn it over. So that's where my brain is babbling, and I appreciate your allowing me to share. And with that, I pass.
Hi, this is Don. May I go?
Hi, Don.
Hiya. Whether I'm in the service work or in a meeting or in the grocery store, when I'm feeling resentment or angry because someone did something that I feel was wrong, for me that's just a red flag of my codependence. And the first place I go is prayer. And then the second place I go is to do an inventory. And what I usually discover is that my resentment, if I'm lucky, I can catch it before it gets to anger. My resentment is actually just false pride. It's my ego. I believe that I'm entitled to better behavior or different behavior. The fact that I believe I'm entitled to anything just speaks to the level of my codependent insanity. So I need to, look at my program, look at what's triggering me, and go behind that in my own recovery, and look at that. And usually it comes down to acceptance and prayer for me is a way of dealing with my resentment, because it moves me out of the ego into at least an attempt to call conscious contact with God. And as far as observing, being a commentator on what I observe, I kind of like, that's not my side of the street. If someone comes up to me and they say something, then I'll deal with it. Or someone calls a business meeting, or I can call a business meeting for that to be dealt with. But I can't trust myself. My codependent, I'm not that non-codependent. I have to go through this whole process of why am I being triggered in the first place, before I can get to the point of you were right and you were wrong. I'm a long way from that. That's where I used to live. I always lived in right and wrong, and I knew best, and I never was ever reflective at all whatsoever. So that's my response to this issue. I also find the term tradition violation an odd term, since their guidelines. I'm personally more comfortable with saying my behavior was inconsistent with the tradition, because no one's really going to give me a violation. I'm not going to be cited by the police or anything. So anyway, thank you very much. It was a very good topic. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Don.
Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. I wasn't sure if I was muted or unmuted. This is Sally from California.
Hi, Sally.
This has been very interesting for me. I'm fairly new to CoDA, probably about 6 months in. So the only thing I've ever really attended is just our meetings, no other conferences or anything. I'm just trying to get myself, I guess, together before I branch out and do anything else. And it's always been my understanding that when we're in a meeting, that anonymity is very important, and that when people speak and they're sharing with people, usually about very deep conflicts, that stays in that room. But what if one of those people speak about something that makes me uncomfortable, even though this person is, sharing their heart with the group and what they're dealing with? Their speech, especially about sexual things, kind of makes me uncomfortable. Should I just let it go because it's an anonymity thing and this is how this person shares? Or should I talk with maybe one of the leaders? I'm kind of conflicted in this. And then there's me wondering if I'm, being overreactive. Any comments?
This is Jen, and I'm codependent. And I have been in meetings where someone shares graphic details of a situation, and it made me uncomfortable. And I was early in my CoDA recovery, and so I just sat there and took it, I guess, is the way that I would put it. I did do some writing on it. I did talk with someone I trusted without breaking anonymity, just saying I'm uncomfortable with what was being shared. And then I referred myself, and my sponsor did too, that I read the boundaries pamphlet. It's a small blue pamphlet, Boundaries in Recovery. And it reminded me of what internal boundaries are, and that I have a right to not listen. I have a right to get up and walk out if that's what's best for me. And it was interesting and incredibly empowering to me, because as a child, I always just sat there and took it. I took the abuse and I just sat there and waited for it to be over with. When I knew trouble was coming and the abuse was on the way, I just wanted to hurry up and get it over with. And it was interesting that sitting in a meeting, I didn't once think to take care of myself. I just thought about getting through that moment. I have attended meetings where they ask you not to get up in the middle of someone's share because it's disruptive. And I disagree with that. So I guess that would be another thing to use that whole process with again. But at the time I was a visitor out of town, and they said, please don't get up in the middle of someone's share. And I thought to myself, I'll do whatever is best for me, because that's what CoDA is about, is self-care. And at that particular meeting, nothing happened where I needed to get up and walk out. It just stood out in my mind that they had informed me not to. But at the meeting where the person kept sharing, eventually someone actually spoke to them, and it wasn't me. I don't know who, but someone shared with them that perhaps it was not necessary to go into so much detail, and that they could keep it a little bit more vague. And I also learned to get up and leave or excuse myself when it makes sense. It is very likely in my CoDA program, not only back then, but even today, that I will be triggered again. Someone will do something or say something that is triggering. And for me, the safest thing sometimes is to remove myself from the situation so that I can do the process and the tools that I have to work with it, rather than just continue to sit through it. And with that, I pass. Thanks.
Thank you. That helps.
I moved to add something on that. I'm Linda, codependent in recovery from SoCal. And I know that a good part of my life was spent thinking that one had to jump up and start shouting whenever one found things not quite up to snuff. And I'd say that a good part of my re-education and recovery has been that I don't need to do that. I don't need to worry about whether Susie finds something as offensive as I do. I don't need to worry about whether everyone wants to get up in arms about a tradition violation. And in general, if I found something to be astonishing and no one else reacted, it's not the end of the world. And how important is it is a nice slogan. Thanks.
Hi, this is Don again. For me personally, one of the driving forces of my codependency in general and addictions in general is I wanted to not feel uncomfortable. I did not want to feel pain. And so I acted out to avoid those feelings. So when I feel uncomfortable now, I just regard it as an opportunity to make, to deal with all those things that I ran from all my life. And so, If my Fosse tells me they feel uncomfortable, I say congratulations, because it's a to me it's a positive, because you can't go from where we come into the program and where we want to get to without going through pain and discomfort. It's an uncomfortable process, and I feel a lot of discomfort still, and I recognize it. That's what I used to try and avoid. That's why I acted out to not experience this experience. And this experience is okay. It's just a feeling. Feelings are temporary. So that's my 2 cents on comfort and discomfort. Thanks.
This is Sally again. Thank you for your insight. I will take everything under consideration and maybe read about the boundaries. That helps, because I don't want to stop someone from sharing what they're dealing with and what's going on in their life. But again, I don't need specifics. But then maybe that's just me, something I need to think about and read up on. Thanks.
Thank you. So now is the time that normally we would be opening up for questions, and we've had a fair amount of that. I just want to open it up to the group that we have the opportunity to stop the recording and just have discussions, if that's something that the group wants to do, or so what would everybody like to do at this point?
Hi, this is Don. Jen, do you have any closing comments before we turn off the recorder?
I don't know that I do. I'm used to having more of an interactive conversational type situation. I definitely got a lot out of the questions and the other shares. It gave me more to think about as well. So I'm always appreciative of that. Basically, I just remind myself when I need to mind my own business and when I need to speak up. And usually that's through a process with my sponsor and my higher power. It's almost never immediate. And with that, I pass. Thanks.
Thank you.
How much time do we have left?
Well, right now it's 12:40. And so, we have time set aside till 2 o'clock. So what normally happens is that we normally do the presentation. That usually happens till 12:40, and then we have 20 minutes of question and answers, and we turn the recording off, and then we still have an hour to interact with anybody that wants to be interacting.
Does the interacting have to do with the topic, or can it be anything?
I think it can be anything.
Okay. I'm open to listening. This is Sally again. This is my first time doing this. And actually, it's kind of nice because I look forward to my meetings, which are once a week, but to have something like this is really nice. I can listen and gather information, and it doesn't necessarily have to be what the main topic was about.
Thank you.
Actually, this is Linda again. I'm intrigued by the notion of speaking up. I wonder, Jen, if you'd care to elaborate on learning to speak up when you need to with regard to your own issues and not keeping silent.
That is a great question. Thank you, Linda. That was definitely a HC thing. My recovery is about speaking up. I have no problem talking. I'm not shy. I'm happy to laugh and discuss anything that anyone wants to talk about, as long as it has nothing to do with me or my deep or private thoughts. So I am happy to be the class clown and to run the show until somebody asks me to share my faults, my fears, and having to address something that for me is uncomfortable. It is good practice, but again, I like to avoid, as someone else had mentioned. So my process for knowing when I need to speak up. So I have feelings about something and I am triggered. And unfortunately for me, through my own childhood or whatever it is that I witnessed, I don't know how I feel. I have no idea that I feel triggered by what happened. I don't always know that I feel that something happened. So I will recognize my own acting out behavior sometime later and then need to reflect on that. I realize that I'm eating more, I'm drinking more, I'm snappy with people around me, I'm not going to my meetings, I'm avoiding situations, and I realize something's not right. And the daily inventory usually touches on that, and yet sometimes I don't recognize a reoccurring theme. And I'm fortunate enough to be married to someone in program that has absolutely no problem telling me what they think of me. And I actually find that helpful sometimes. So I'll give you guys an example. My mother passed away in April 2018. And my brother and I thought it would be helpful to not only ourselves, but everybody involved, if we just did nothing for the first couple of months. Like, that was just going to give us room to grieve, and, you know, somehow we were going to address it better by giving it room and space. And so June, July came around, and that was the time when we needed to close out where she lived. It was when we had her celebration of life. And I realized that my feelings, my grief, and my triggers had all been completely on hold, on pause, and I had done nothing for 3 months. And that's when I realized that I did need to speak up. I recognized that I do have something going on in my body. I have anxiety. I have something that I need to share. And the interesting thing is that I shared it at her celebration of life, how I was feeling. I had some resentments. I had some shame, some regrets. And all of a sudden, I felt the release in my body that I had actually said what I needed to say. And I really respect that process because I didn't recognize it before. I had no idea that when I speak up, my body actually responds, and I feel better after having said it. Unfortunately, when I was younger, I would say horrible things to people. I was mean, and I wanted to shut people down. So I would say something incredibly hurtful to shut them up. And after I spoke those words, I did not feel better in my body. So it was a good example for me to understand the difference of what it feels like when I speak up. But that same example with my mother passing, I recognize now, because someone keeps pointing it out to me, that every time I have to address anything in her affairs, I'm still processing legal things and financial things. And every time it comes up, I act out. And I am still struggling with grief. And I have to recognize and speak it. I miss my mom. I don't want to do this. I hate that I have to do this, but I'm going to be okay. And I'm going to get through this one moment at a time, one day at a time. So knowing that I need to speak up. So a different example that I think would be more applicable to us in CoDA is I am somehow at a CoDA event or a CoDA meeting or something where I am speaking with another member of the fellowship, and it's not in a formal situation. So number one, they have no problem interrupting me, and number two, they have no problem sharing their personal opinion of me. And how do I know that I need to speak up? And this is my personal opinion. This is not for everyone. There are people in my life that I do not feel that I need to use my energy, time, or strength to convince that what they did was hurtful. I feel I need to speak up when I think it's actually going to improve my relationship with that person. I decided some time ago there are people that I value in my life, and I hope that they see it that way, so that when I feel hurt or something has come up, I'm like, hey, this is what happened for me, and this is how I feel about it, and I just need to share it with you. And I usually preface it with, you don't have to say anything, or if you do want to say something, that's great, but you don't have to. I just need to say this for me. When this happened, this is how I felt. And then leave it there. And hope that our relationship improves because we're that much more aware of our effect and our situation and how other people see it. On the other hand, there's other people in CoDA that I do not value my relationship with them, and they say something terrible to me, and I just have to shake it off and tell myself what other people think of me is none of my business, and walk outside for a little bit and try and get the energy out of my body and get back to work and focus on what matters. And for me, that's doing the healthy things and not spending time worrying about the unhealthy things. So thank you for the question. And with that, I pass. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So I think me rambling on about myself is actually not as productive as when you guys ask me questions. So I really appreciate it. That was great.
And maybe you'd care to elaborate a bit on the difference between manipulating someone and trying to control, when you're making a comment. I mean, how does one judge? How does one say to oneself, I really didn't need to ask them that. I really didn't need to comment on that. I was just trying to manipulate them.
That's a great question. How do I know if when I'm speaking up or my actions are manipulative and controlling? I was told by sponsors and heard shares previously in CoDA meetings that it's all about my intentions or my motivation for the action. So when I donate money to a charity, am I expecting them to praise me and to advertise what a great person I am, or do I genuinely just want to donate? That's different. So when I offer to help someone in CoDA, am I doing it for the right reason, the healthy reason that I just want to be of service and I don't care if I get any recognition and I don't care if it goes my way? I feel like I'm probably in a healthy spot. But if I feel the energy and the giddiness of getting away with something when I'm telling someone something, I know that my intentions are to control and manipulate and see what I can get away with. It absolutely feeds my ego when I convince others to see things my way. And that's why quite often when I'm in meetings, I try not to share right away, and I try to not share my opinion first, so that I give the room and people space to form their own opinions first, because I tend to be that person that manipulates and controls. There are situations where I share how I feel with someone, and I genuinely have no expectations. I don't care if they say anything, and I have to let go of the results. That would be a healthy interaction where what happened was triggering for me and it hurt my feelings and I'm working on it. And I just wanted you to know that I'm working on it because I care about our relationship and I hope we can get along better in the future. On the other hand, if I'm going over there and just trying to dominate and bully them and say, what you did was terrible, you should never do that again. I'm absolutely controlling. I'm not God. And whatever they're doing, their behavior and their actions is between them and their higher power, God. And that is really difficult for me because I recognize that I am so smart and I know how to fix absolutely everything if you just give me a chance. So I'll just sit in the middle of the room, and when you're ready, I will tell you how to fix everything. And that is my ego, and that is not healthy behavior. So I would say it's my motivation, and if I have any expectations for the outcome, then I'm definitely trying to manipulate and control the situation.
Thank you.
And with that, I pass. Thanks.
And so with respect to your fourth question about when you witness someone breaking a rule, what do you say about the level of awareness within any group, whether it's a meeting or an intergroup, a voting entity, or even the floor of the CSC? How often are we aware that someone's behavior is actually violating a tradition or breaking a rule?
Okay. So it's interesting to me. I've had situations where I'm in a meeting and people have seen me there for a long time. They've heard me share and they know that I have time in CoDA, and someone new will come in and they'll do something. And you can just feel the energy in the room that someone or several people feel that something has taken place. And I feel them all look at me. And it was really uncomfortable for me because I understood that they now saw me as a person that was going to speak up, the person that was going to police the meeting or rescue us all from unhealthy behavior. And it was interesting because it was a great opportunity for me to speak up. And someone had cross-talked or someone brought their baby to the meeting, whatever it was, they kept looking to me to do it. And so I did it one last time because I'm a codependent and I'll do what you expect of me because I'm a people pleaser. On the other hand, I had this great epiphany that it was a great opportunity to share how I felt. And so after it all was said and done and it was in the meeting and it was kind of that lull where no one's sharing and you have a bunch of extra time, I shared a second time and I said, I just want to say to anyone that's listening, I don't enjoy timing people. I don't enjoy interrupting people. I don't enjoy telling people what to do. And I don't enjoy being the only one that does it. It is really uncomfortable for me, but I do it because I want to be of service to CoDA. I want the meeting to be healthy, and I want to model that behavior so that people that have never experienced it or don't know what to do have some idea of how they might want to do it in the future. But generally speaking, I would rather not do it either, and I pass. And it felt so good to relieve that burden and that stress of being that person in the room that everybody expected to do everything. And the very next week, people volunteered to do all the other pieces. And somebody had told me later that they just thought it was easier because I seemed to enjoy it. And that was also telling to me that I enjoy being in control. I enjoy being a leader. I enjoy telling other people what to do. And so any opportunity to shirk my duties, which may look lazy, and it probably is in many instances, is also an opportunity to take the spotlight away from me and give someone else an opportunity to stretch and step up and grow in their recovery. And so I appreciate that as well. And with that, I pass. Thanks.
Thank you.
I have a question for other people on the phone if they're willing to speak to it. I have a question about how does CoDA as a fellowship handle the situation when someone cannot let something go and they just keep bringing it up. And to me, I feel like that's bullying, and that's trying to manipulate and control the situation because, say a decision was already made, okay? The group, the fellowship, there was a vote. Everybody decided that this is the way our meeting's going to be run, and it's done. The group conscience carries. So the very next week or the very next month or the very next year, that person brings it up again and brings it up again until they get their way. They just figure if they keep pushing it, eventually they're going to get their way. And it's not a person to person where I need to speak my truth because I feel violated, and yet I feel like it's distracting the whole group from getting really good, healthy, productive things done, as opposed to keep catering to someone that won't let things go. Does anybody have something on that?
Boy, Jen, I've never seen that kind of behavior.
For those of you that are not visually seeing, Linda's being sarcastic.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I've seen that, and I find it frustrating, and I do feel like I'm being manipulated. And yet, I also saw something quite amazing last conference. A voting entity brought something up. It was signed to a committee, and the committee voted not to do it. They brought it up the next year and it was signed to another committee, and they decided not to do it. So now the rules say they can bring it to the conference floor. They did, and the conference voted that, yeah, it was a good idea. So even though I was feeling quite annoyed that they were bringing it up for the third time, the conference approved it. You know? And that was a fascinating lesson for me.
Do you have any personal situations where you're dealing with someone that can't let something go? There's people outside of CoDA that we have healthy boundaries with, and yet they keep addressing something that I've already apologized for, and I need to move on instead of bringing up old stuff. Does anybody have anything on that?
Well, this is Linda again. This is not outside of CoDA, but I've seen meetings break up over the question of how often will we permit revoting of an issue that's been asked and answered. You know, people become frustrated by the constant reintroduction of an issue that's been voted on, and they attempt to say, we will not consider this issue, any issue that's been had a group conscience will not be reconsidered for 6 months, a year, you name it. And I've seen attempts to do that on the floor of the CoDA Service Conference as well, because people do get, you know, a little frustrated by the constant reintroduction of motions. But again, that's within CoDA.
Well, this is Don. Outside of CoDA, I have to recognize that I'm uncomfortable with healthy relationships, and I'm comfortable with unhealthy relationships because that's what I'm used to. I'm used to the toxic relationship, and I've gotten pretty good at ending toxic relationships and turning around and re-entering another toxic relationship. You know, so that's been my lifelong pattern, and so for me, it's a matter of healthy versus unhealthy for me personally, and recognizing what's toxic for me and what isn't toxic for me. And that's going to vary and differ for everybody depending on their underlying issues. But that's something that I've had to come to terms with. There's just some places that I don't want to go, some people I don't want to talk to because it's toxic. It doesn't feel good. It reminds me of my fourth grade teacher hitting me on the head with a thimble, you know, during math or something like that, you know. So there are certain places I give my permission not to be.
So it's 1:02, and this is the time that we usually stop the recording. And I'm going to We thank our higher
the
power
higher power
for
for
all
all
that
that we have
received.
received at this
as we
meeting.
close. May we take with
Take
us
with
With
us
us,
the wisdom,
wisdom,
love,
love,
love
acceptance, and hope of recovery.
of recovery.
So now we can stop the recording.